Hey there, friends. I haven't really been interested in doing reviews of decks lately. Like I said, I sort of have always wanted my channel to be a little more educational, but every once in a while something interesting comes up and I want to take a look at it and review it for you. And so this is one of those times. And spoiler alert, I really like it. And I'll talk about some misapprehensions I had. Is misapprehensions a word or is that a made-up word? I don't know. But I do really like it, and I will explore why, and I'll tell you also some things I wish were a little different. But there's not really much. Principally, it's a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and you know how I feel about that. So this is by RP Studio, which is a Hachette book company, and I'm not a big fan of Hachette, honestly. They're the company that, among other things, decided to publish Woody Allen's book. But whatever. We're gonna support queer creators. It comes in a really nice box, though, for decks, for companies that don't usually produce tarot decks or that aren't known for producing tarot decks. It's always interesting to see what they come up with. But this is nicely produced. So what does the box say? An inclusive tarot for the queer community and those who love them. Tarot is about more than divination, which I hate when people say, but whatever. It's a powerful tool for self-discovery and self-love. It's true. It's just like, let's stop shitting on divination. And as I have said many times, there is an oblique racism and classism in shitting on divination. So, I just want to throw that out there. In Queer Tarot, authors and artists Ash and Chess have created an inclusive, joyful interpretation of the cards to help you on your journey. This deck was made with all queers in mind, all identities, body types, races, ethnicities, abilities, and sexualities, and features dozens of real queer folks to help inspire you. With beautiful, I don't know how to pronounce this, risographed art that highlights LGBTQ+ symbols and stories, queer interpretations of the classic cards, and questions to consider during your readings, this deck will become an empowering and affirming part of your magical practice. And then it talks about what it includes. And I will say I think they did do a very nice job with inclusivity, and more importantly, representation. And one of the ways that I think they ensured that this was successful is that all of the people depicted in this deck are real people. And one of the really thoughtful things they do, I'll just sort of show you as we look at the packaging, is that in the guidebook, for each of the cards, they actually tell you the name and pronouns of the model for each card, but more than that, in the back of the book, there's a little model credits and card art descriptions where it describes the card. I don't super know why. But the sort of social media tags of the models in the deck, and their pronouns again. And so I think that is a really great way to make something authentically depicting people, which is to use real-life models, and a variety of them. And the book is nice. I mean, it's got a nice quality to it. It's I don't think, like, content-wise, there's nothing sort of revolutionary here, other than naming the models and their pronouns and including that in the back. But it's nice. I love people's origin stories, and the creators talk about how they came to tarot. There's some spreads, which are cool. Again, they're not things that I use necessarily, but I think they're thoughtfully designed. There's a spectrum spread, an identity spread, a good morning spread, new relationship spread, a new perspective spread, a desire spread, and a goal spread. And then sort of beyond that, it's just card interpretations, and they're pretty standard issue with Rider-Waite-Smith with, I think a queer eye. Oh God, I can't believe I just said that. But yes, it is what it is. So the box is nice, and it houses things well. It's nice that the cards actually come in another box within the box, because oftentimes with these sort of inside... Oh, this one probably would be fine. They slide around and sometimes get damaged. Looking at you, Red Feather. But let's take a look at the cards. Love a hot pink interior. Put that aside. There's this backing here, which is sort of this... I don't know, it makes me feel very sort of like early 90s ska punk rock kind of situation. and we'll walk through the cards. So I am very suspicious about anything that is sort of like dubbed queer or gay friendly or whatever, because what I find is, and it's a flaw that a lot of queer people fall into, is that their idea of queerness is the only one that gets reflected. And throughout a lot of my life, I've felt left out of things that are queer or gay or however, whatever language we were using at the time. Queer is obviously a much more inclusive term now. One that I think is interesting that a lot of straight people feel uncomfortable using because they've used it against us for so long, and the queer community has sort of said, oh, by the way, we're using that now. You can't have it, or you can't use it against us anymore. So I was worried that I would find it sort of not inclusive, or inclusive of only sort of one idea of queerness, but I do not find that to be the case. I'm going to say the main thing that I have a problem with, honestly, is that the Chariot is the only card that depicts an obvious disability, and I don't have a problem necessarily with the Chariot being someone in a wheelchair. It's just that that's always the card that depicts someone in a wheelchair, and I think it's too easy to say that the Chariot is the only card that can do that. So it bothers me. I don't think it's like a deal breaker, but it's like so many people just go to that easy answer. And I think there's just more interesting ways to depict people with disabilities than just to say, and that's not the only one in the deck, but and I understand that it is difficult to depict some disabilities because many are not visible to the naked eye, which is totally fine. But it's just the easy choice of saying, the Chariot has wheels, let's stick a wheelchair on it. And it's a real person in this deck, so it's not like there's, I'm just sharing with you that I think it's like the obvious way, and I think that it could be a little more interesting than that. That said, I do like the deck. The cardstock is really nice. I'm trying to think of something to compare it to. There are decks that have this feel. It's like that silky, but it's not. It's like a matte situation, but it's not like super matte. It's not sticky. It's Rider-Waite-Smith, but it's de-Christianized, which is another thing that I think is really great. That was the thing I struggled with a lot when I was learning tarot, because I was coming out of my dislike of my relationship to the religion of my youth. So to have, all those symbols removed and replaced, in some cases by things that for me are a little cute, but again, I think, whatever. So here's the Fool. I'm not going to go through each one and sort of say who the person is. They're people in the creator's lives or whatnot, but you can sort of get a sense of, again, that they are, because they are real people, they are depicted with authenticity, and to that end, I say very cool. Color palette is very bright. I mean, you could see from the box that it's all bright, bold, sometimes edging on neon. I'm not mad at that. I think it's not a palette that I normally reach for, but I think it's cool in this context. And it's got a hand-drawn quality to it. It's not obviously photorealism. This is, it's very kind of it's hand-drawn. It's in much the same way that the original Rider-Waite-Smith would have been. So here's the Chariot that I was talking about earlier. Again, it's not a bad card, and I love the little doggies on it. Just, like maybe more than one person in a wheelchair. Like maybe the Chariot is not the one. You know what I mean? And that goes for like many decks, not just this one. That's my only real complaint about it, I have to say. I think, other than that, I think I was suspicious. I was sus, as the kids say, and wasn't sure how I was going to feel. But I feel largely pretty positive about it, and I think it is successful. And there aren't... None of the titles really get changed, which I actually like. Even though, you still have the king and queens, as you'll see. But because this is a queer deck, it's not that, like, male-presenting figures and female-presenting figures are limited or are limited to those cards. There's all kinds of presentations on the courts. Not my favorite deck card in the world, but it's fine. I just don't sort of understand why. I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter. It's fine. It's cute. It's modern. It's cool. It's kitsch. One thing I would say too, I think, is I would love to. The titles are a little hard to see, but they're there. You know what I mean? I think, that's just being nitpicky. I was also feeling some sort of way about the fact that there's very little nudity in this deck, and I don't think decks have to have nudity, but I felt like there's nudity in the Waitsmith, and I felt initially like, why are we sort of, in a deck that's sort of about queerness and openness and being who we are, why are we putting clothes on figures that in tarot are traditionally not clothed? Like, that felt, to me, kind of oddly conservative. But when I thought that, I didn't know that they were all real people, real models. And so I can sort of understand people not wanting to sort of be depicted naked in a deck, although I will say, I don't see any, I think, why not? But, also, I get it. I get that that's probably why, and I'm less kind of huffy about it. I just, anything that sort of smacks of conservatism always sort of makes me feel a little anxious, but it's fine. Here we get into the suits. There's small changes to these cards. I would say that it's hard to escape the colonialism inherent in Pamela Coleman-Smith's images, but in these versions, you sort of don't get that because they're not really looking at Dominion in the same way, which, for folks who are really interested in the images, I think is a good thing. So this is obviously the Suit of Wands. Again, all of these are real people. Again, very bold, poppy colors. And it's a poppy deck. It's modern. If you don't like sort of modern dress decks, I think that this might be a thing that you're not living for. But I think, for the most part, I don't really reach for decks like that. I like decks that sort of have a timeless quality to it, where I'm not sort of noticing the clothes as much. But I think that they've done a nice job of not really drawing attention to that in the way of oh, look how modern it is. Look at me holding my cell phone in Starbucks kind of thing, which is nothing wrong with that. It's just not what I reach for generally as a reader. And you can see again that the presentation or the gender presentation of the courts is not sort of limited to traditional binaries, which of course is apt for this deck. So here we get into cups. Big giant cat in the sky. Don't know why it's there. Not a cat person, but it's fine. It's successful. I think that's a thing that I think is good, and I sort of feel like this is the kind of thing that will make people feel seen, and it's like queer, but it's not. I don't know how. It's not like. It's people living lives. You know what I mean? It's not about. I think sometimes so much of depiction of marginalized groups in pop culture focuses so much on trauma and stereotypes, and these are just sort of people in their environments just being, and that can be very, I think, healing for a lot of people, you know what I mean, to sort of just see these, as neutral as the images of the Waitsmith can be. I think to see that sort of neutrality is very useful for folks, and just to see little things, little subtleties that are comfortable and lived in, you know what I mean, and they feel organic and they feel, again, authentic, and you know what I mean, and lived in is a phrase that I really like. They don't feel contrived, and I think that's something that you get when you are of the world that you're trying to depict, for the most part. So here we are in swords. I love her boots. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good deck. I mean, look at the fishnets, that's so dope. And again, a lot of the sort of Christian images have been replaced with neutraler, more neutral things. So am I still sort of drifting on a frame here? It's been a while since I've shot in my old camcorder. It's been a while since I've done a video like this, because I've been doing the Majors on Earth series. If I were getting a reading from someone and they pulled out this deck, I would feel like, oh, they are interested in a deck that creates comfort and visibility for queer people. How cool is that? That's how I would react to this, whether or not they themselves were. And as I always say, I think more authentic representation, not less. So, and it's interesting. I mean, you can kind of say, does the Rider-Waite-Smith... I mean, you can sort of go on this sociological, sort of anthropological path of like, you know, once you take away the Golden Dawn stuff from the Rider-Waite-Smith, does the Waite-Smith still have currency in modern life? Does it make sense? It's a tough question to answer, but it is sort of endemic to tarot, so it's hard to sort of separate the two in a lot of ways. So, it's interesting. Let's zoom out, and I will just show you how it shuffles. I haven't shuffled it yet. I've just been reading through the guidebook, and it is a meaty deck, which for my small hands, not always ideal, but it does riffle shuffle nicely. It's going to be one of those things I think I'm going to lose card. Yeah, so it's chonky. Not gonna. Oh, see, yeah, and I'm also clumsy when I'm on camera. Well, I'm clumsy anyway, but bridging it is tough. But the riffle isn't too bad. I think I can get used to it. It's meaty. I keep wanting to say it's a meaty tuck. That's a drag race situation. Overhands nicely. It's good. It's good. I think it's successful. I like it a lot. I think there's very few things on the market like this. I think as tarot mainstreams, it's like, it's nice that there's like decks for every cat lover out there, but I think it's cool when creators come up with something that does sort of make space for groups. You know, and in the guidebook, they talk a lot about how, you know, queer people are still experiencing trauma, and we're still every day seeing in the news stories of, you know, politicians trying to make us into wedge issues and really to torture trans and queer kids, and it's fucked up. So, you know, where people in marginalized groups can find themselves represented, I think is good and important. So, this is a thumbs up from me. I will probably use this. I see no reason not to. I think I can easily feel like this is a deck that I would put in rotation. Aside from the fact that it's hard to shuffle for me with my tiny little hands, my T-Rex hands, I think it's great. So bravo to the creators, Ashley Molesso and Chess Needham, who go by Ash and Chess. This is the Queer Tarot Mass Market Edition. I don't know that there was any other edition. This is a mass market deck. There you go. Hope you enjoyed this. Be good.